Tell us about what you make of
My
this
pleasure,
report in the
David.
Wall Street Journal. Assuming that it is true that they are going to modify at least their Made in China 2025 program, how significant could that be?
Well, I think that, first of all, it's great that they're having these talks, and great that China is talking about rolling back some of the retaliatory tariffs that they impose, for instance, on U.S. automobiles from the current 40% down to the previous level of 15%. So the fact that they're having negotiations is good news. China needs to modify its Made in 2025 policy. It's unfair subsidies to a whole host of industries that they want to be world class in, whether it's robotics, electric automobiles, semiconductors, biotechnology, and so forth. But I don't think that the Chinese are going to back away from their overall plan of wanting to be world class leaders, because so much of what they use now in the high-tech area comes almost exclusively from the United States. And so when Obama administration and even the Trump administration has threatened to stop U.S. companies from selling very sophisticated chips or Corning glass for cell phones or Qualcomm chips used in cell phones, it would have bankrupted a lot of these Chinese companies. So the message to the Chinese is we need to double down on this Made in China 2025 policy of being more self-reliant on our own manufactured items and high-tech areas. Now, maybe the Chinese will let U.S. and foreign companies provide some of these things, but provided that they're made inside China as opposed to being exported from the United States to China in case the United States were to ban these U.S. companies from selling to China.
Gary, as I said, you were our ambassador over to Beijing for some years. You've dealt with the Chinese. There's an impression that the Chinese have a tendency to say really pleasant things across the table, to assure us of things that we would like to hear, but then often it doesn't get done when it comes to trade. I mean, you can go all the way back to the WTO. Not everything got done that they promised. How do we make sure they actually deliver on their promises and negotiations?
Well, that's going to be the tricky part of these negotiations. What will be the firm, detailed, verifiable commitments with specific dates and specific goals or measures that the Chinese commit to, and by what particular date? And I'm sure that the administration is going to continue to keep some of the tariffs that we have imposed on on Chinese goods coming into the country as a condition for seeing some of this progress.
So let's turn to a different part of the U.S.-China relationship, which is involved Huawei, which is the largest, I think, telecoms company in the world at this point. And there was this arrest of the CFO, who's also the daughter of the founder of Huawei, up in Canada. She's out on bail now. President Trump was asked about this, actually, in a Reuters interview yesterday, about whether, in fact, he might let her go if, in fact, we got a trade deal. And part of what he said is, whatever's good for this country, I would do. If I think it's good for what will be certainly the largest trade deal ever made, I would certainly intervene if I thought it was necessary. I really wonder, Ambassador Locke, is that a constructive approach? In this sense, it was thought that this was a law enforcement matter. The prosecutors are handling it. We keep that over here. We keep trade over on the other side. Has the president really put those two things together in a way that the Chinese will say, now, we can negotiate our way out of law enforcement problems?
Well, first of all, it's good that she's out on bail. I think it, with a lot of conditions, electronic monitoring and so forth, and she's got a lot of property in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, so that she's not going to be a flight risk. And so I think it has helped lower the temperature. We need to keep the two separate, however, because I'm very concerned that if we give the impression that people are arrested for political reasons and that their arrests and their prosecutions can be solved by using political pressure, that also lessens the respect that people around the country have for our American system of rule of law. I'm a former criminal prosecutor, so I'm very concerned when we hear talk that politicians, whether left or right, Democrat or Republican, are interfering and getting involved in criminal prosecutions. Now, whether or not she should have been prosecuted in the first place is another question. Because when have we prosecuted high-level executives of companies that have violated Iran sanctions? When have we prosecuted high-level CEOs or management in terms of the Wall Street problems that we had in 2008 or 2009, the collapse of the U.S. economy? And also, what's going to happen when European countries continue to honor the Iran Accord and do trade with Iran? Are we going to start arresting and indicting and charging CEOs, CFOs, top management of European companies because they're violating the U.S. sanctions on Iran. So this is a very, very tricky issue, a very delicate issue. But we need to lower the temperature. But we need to be very, very careful about saying that presidents can get involved in criminal prosecutions just to solve financial problems or trade issues.
Finally, Ambassador, do you see a way out? Do you see a way actually for us to come to terms with China that doesn't relinquish either the vital national interests of either country?
Well, the United States has, and United States companies and our government, but not just U.S. companies, but foreign companies and governments have very serious concerns about the trade policies of China, their investment policy, the forced transfer of technology that U.S. or foreign companies have to hand over to their joint venture, their Chinese partners. Part of it is because so many parts of the Chinese economy are off limits to foreign investment, and where foreign investment is allowed, it can only be with less than 50% foreign ownership, which means you have to have a Chinese partner. And when you have to have a Chinese partner, you got to share the technology. So that's part of the rub. If China were able to move to open up more markets and to allow foreign companies to have controlling ownership and not have to have a Chinese partner. If the foreign companies want to have a partner because it's good business sense, that's their decision, but they shouldn't be forced to, and they shouldn't be forced to transfer that technology. So I think if we can really get to some of those issues, then there can be areas of both economic progress for both the Chinese companies and U.S. companies, more jobs for both the American people and the Chinese people, and we can start cooperating on some of the more fundamental issues facing the world, whether it's North Korea, whether it's climate change, whether it's finding cures for dreaded diseases. There's many areas of cooperation, and that's why we need to make sure, and more importantly, China is America's largest export destination for so many of our products and goods. You know, American farmers export more to China than to any other country. And China depends on a strong U.S. economy and supplying high-quality, low-cost goods for American consumers, which means more money in the pocketbooks of Americans that they can spend on vacation, retirement, college education, health care, and you name it. So our economies are very interdependent. We've got to solve this thing. We've got to avoid a trade war and start focusing on other matters that are crucial to the economic and security interests of both the United States and China.